Hi there, thanks for tuning in. So we're doing a mountain landscape, a snowy mountain landscape. Here I'm doing the sky first. This is wet on wet. I wet the paper first just with plain water, and I'm going over it with the lightest color, the lightest blue of the sky. And I'm framing out the mountain. So this is a bit of negative painting where we're framing our subject with the negative space. So I'm going to be using a lot of white from the paper for use of the snow in the mountain. I'm using a silver brush, the round brush, which is a great brush to use. If you haven't gotten those, you definitely need to get one of the silver brushes. Here I'm adding ultramarine blue, just a lot of pigment, you can see on the right there. And I added a little bit of a pinky rose color. It's, I'll get you the name in a minute, called, anyway, Opera Rose. Oh my gosh, Opera Rose. So I just drop the color right in there, and I like to blend the color on my paper, on my canvas. I think it's a kind of a more natural effect. So I just dropped in the Opera Rose there and let it turn into kind of this pretty purpley color, trying to get a little sunset feel. So now I'm letting the sky dry, and you can see it's dried a lot already. It looks a lot different. Watercolors tend to dry, almost about 30% lighter, so you kind of have to keep that in mind when you're doing, especially when you're doing wet on wet. If you're doing wet on dry, it doesn't dry as much lighter, because your pigment is usually, it's a little bit, you have a lot more pigment on your brush if you're doing wet on dry usually. So anyway, here we go with the grass. I'm doing, I did wet on wet again, and I'm doing just a yellow underlayer, so the yellow will come through and have a nice kind of a glowy effect. So maybe like some flowers and some a rustic color grass. Now I'm adding in a touch of green for some grass, some shrubs, that sort of thing. I'm mixing up some ultramarine blue, same color as the sky, and some yellow, azu yellow from I think it's M. Graham, and just getting the green in there, getting some grass and shrubs, and rolling. You can roll, if you notice my brush is horizontal, it's almost horizontal, definitely at an angle. Some areas I do practically totally horizontal, and I'm rolling the brush a little bit. But if you notice, I'm using upward movements to simulate grass. And we don't want to go side by side or paint, we want to go, grass grows upwards, so I'm painting upwards. And now I'm letting it dry, and the paper's pretty wet, so I'm just kind of letting it bleed into, all the colors bleed in together, and making sure, touching up the edges there of the paint. I don't want it to puddle. Now I'm adding some salt. And I kind of waited there for a little bit to make sure the puddles went away, because then the salt just melts completely. I did a kind of a close-up and added extra lighting there so you could see the salt, and now that's when the salt is it's absorbing the paint and it's almost dry. So now I'm just going to wait and let it dry, and then you wipe off the salt, and you have a very cool effect. I use it a lot for snow, the salt effect, or it could be like fun little flowers, like just little, it almost looks like a dandelion. So we'll let the salt dry and see what happens. Now I'm going into the mountain, and if you see, if you look closely at the mountain and put up a white sheet of paper against the reference photo, you'll see that there's very little stark white in the actual mountain and in the snow. The snow is never really stark white. There are a few spots, of course, but it's reflecting the sky. So if you have all these beautiful blues and purple colors in the sky, then those colors are going to be on the snow. So that is what I'm doing now. I'm pretty much using the same colors that are in the sky, and I'm using them on the mountain. and I did wet on dry, but I used a very wet brush to get kind of a blurred effect and kind of a powdery, you know, I wanted like a smooth powdery effect for the snow. So I'm using a lot of water, and I'm kind of just feeling out the paint and how the paper is absorbing and where the paint is going. So I just did that area right there, and I picked up a lot of the pigment, and now I'm mixing some others. So now I kind of can see the colors and what I want to do. So now I'm mixing some more colors there. You can see it's basically just a purple. It's just the Opera Rose and the Ultramarine, and I think I did a little bit of Payne's Gray as well. Payne's Gray has a nice blue undertone, so it mixes well with the Opera Rose. I went pretty blue here. I'm going more blue. This is really capturing that dark blue in the left side of the painting, so that top of the ridge there is really pretty blue. I'm using a lot of water there on the edges, so I don't have any hard edges right now. And if they are hard, I have a light pencil where the ridges are penciled in there, so I'm following that very light sketch that I did, and those are pretty much going to only be the hard lines that I'm going to let happen. Everything else I kind of want pretty blurry. And I'm picking up some paint there. I just used a damp wet brush, and I'm picking up some paint. Okay, so here's the salt. You can see I'm wiping it off there, and we have a cool little effect. It kind of looks like snow, but we can also make them look like little flowers, maybe little poppies, like I said, dandelions. So here I'm using an old, well not old, but like a real cheapy rough brush, and I dipped it in the rose color and Opera Rose, and then I kind of mixed it in with a little white to get like a really light pink, and I just did it against the horizon there. And now I'm going in. Now this is wet on dry, so now I'm going in, I'm blending in a little bit of green there and trying to get a darker effect there for the horizon for a sense of depth. And I'm just letting everything blend in, and now I'm adding some yellow. And these are watercolor, you work light to dark, so I'm building up layers. Now with the same brush, it's really like a thick bristly brush, and if you just do upward strokes with a lot of pigment on there, you get some kind of cool little grass effect. So I'm working with that, seeing what happens there. Now I'm just splattering, maybe like a fun effect of poppies or something. Blotting it up, adding a little white, blotting it up because I want it blurry. I don't want, in the distance, you don't want detail. So here we go with the second layer of the sky. I did wet it first very quickly, a very light coat of water first, and then I added the exact same colors, ultramarine blue and the opera rose. And I just I tilted my board and letting it blend so it doesn't, so I don't have any hard lines anywhere. And then I just dabbed with the tissue right around the mountain so I wouldn't have any hard lines right against the mountain, so it wouldn't puddle really. Because wherever you put the water, the paint goes. Now this is a really cool scrubber that I love, those scrubbers. And if I did too much of an area with the watercolor, I can just do a nice light scrub and I can bring the white of the paper back. It's never the same as if it, you know, as if it didn't have watercolor on it, but it can definitely help. So, and I also use this scrubber to just lighten some areas and maybe even to get like a cloud in front of the mountains and that sort of thing. Now over there in the left side, that was some dry brushing, and you'll see some examples of that later. I think I went a little dark on that side, so you'll see I did some scrubbing like what I just did there. I did some scrubbing to lighten it up and to create a contrast, some more ridges and that sort of thing. So now here I am getting darker, a little darker, a little darker. And this pinky purple, it will lighten up a lot, so it'll look really nice. Again, it's getting the reflection of that sky, so on that side of the mountain, it's really gonna naturally be a pinky purple, because that's what the sky is. So now I'm going with a little blue ridge there, and I'm lightening it up a little bit, and blending and blotting, and getting some structure into the mountain. Okay, so here is a fun part. I'm using a little sponge, sea sponge, and dipped it in the opera rose color again and doing a tree. It's like a little fall color tree there, and now I added some more alizarin crimson and then some dark colors for the trunk. And the tree was all wet when I did that. Now here's some dry brushing. My brush is, the paper's dry, my brush hardly has any water on it, and I'm using a lot of pigment on the brush, and I'm just really pressing the brush down hard, and so you get the kind of a scraping effect. So that will give you texture of the rocks and that sort of thing on the mountain. I suggest you have a little test sheet right next to your painting so you can test it first on your test sheet and play around with it first before you go right on your painting, so you know the level of water on your brush. It's a fun technique and fun texture to do. Here we go. Here's the finished result, and it was snowing outside, and we got I don't know, at least 3 feet probably of snow the other day. So I thought, oh, what a great shot to take the picture by the window there. So there's the finished product, and I hope you guys love it, and thank you for watching. Bye.